Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. The magical world created by J.K. Rowling amazes us with its countless unique details, mysteries, and, of course, powerful artifacts. Some of them are so strong that in the wrong hands they could change the course of history. Today, I'm going to tell you about the most dangerous, powerful, and mysterious magical items in the world of Harry Potter. Enjoy watching! Number 1. The Time Turner. At the top of the list is the Time Turner, an artifact that doesn't just change a wizard's life but can rewrite the course of magical history itself. Its very mechanism is shrouded in mystery and raises countless questions. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione uses it to attend multiple classes at once and later to save Sirius Black. All seems fine except for one troubling fact. The Ministry of Magic hands such a powerful tool to a 13-year-old girl without hesitation. Later, in The Cursed Child, another version appears, one capable of travelling decades back in time, not just hours. Needless to say, such an object could tear the very fabric of time. No wonder the Ministry eventually decided to destroy most of them. But one question lingers. What if one still exists somewhere? Number 2. The Elder Wand, one of the 3 Deathly Hallows. The Elder Wand is more than a tool. It's a symbol of absolute magical power. According to legend, it was crafted by Death and given to the eldest of 3 brothers. Since then, it passed from one owner to another. Each of them met a grim fate. The wand recognizes not kindness or loyalty, but strength. It can't be inherited or gifted, only won through conquest. Dumbledore kept it in good hands, but even he understood the danger. In the books, Harry uses it to repair his old wand. In the films, he snaps it in half and throws it away, but that was the director's choice. Where the wand truly lies today remains a mystery. Number 3. The Resurrection Stone, the 2nd Deathly Hallow, a stone said to bring back the dead, but does it really? Those who appear after its activation aren't truly alive, more like shadows, memories, spirits. They can't stay in our world, can't touch, hug, or speak as they once did. Harry uses the stone at the darkest moment of his life, just before walking into death in the Forbidden Forest. He summons the spirits of his parents, Sirius and Lupin, so he wouldn't feel alone. Then he drops the stone and leaves it behind, forever. Number 4. The Invisibility Cloak, the 3rd and arguably most innocent of the Deathly Hallows, a cloak that renders its wearer completely invisible. In the Harry Potter world, there are other ways to hide: potions, spells, ordinary cloaks. But this one is different. It never wears out, never weakens, and hides even from magical detection. Harry used it to escape, sneak into the most secure places in Hogwarts, and even elude Voldemort. Only a few magical objects can see through it, like the Marauder's map or Mad Eye Moody's magical eye. The cloak is a symbol of wisdom, moderation, and true protection. Of all the Deathly Hallows, it alone fulfills its purpose without destruction. Number 6. The Philosopher's Stone, the legendary creation of alchemist Nicolas Flamel. It can produce the elixir of life and turn any metal into gold. People have killed, fought, and betrayed for it. But Flamel didn't seek power. He lived a long life in the shadows, never interfering with the world. The stone was kept in Gringotts, then moved to Hogwarts under layers of magical protection. Voldemort tried to obtain it to regain his body and strength. Harry stopped him, and later Flamel, along with his wife, destroyed the stone. But one wonders, are we truly sure no other such artifact exists? Number 7. The Marauder's Map. At first glance, an old piece of parchment. In reality, a powerful magical tool. The map shows every corridor and room in Hogwarts, including secret passages and hidden doors. Most importantly, it displays the names and locations of everyone in the school in real time. It was created by 4 friends, James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew. Each infused it with their own magic, skills, and spirit. To an ordinary user, it appears blank a body until the words, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good," are spoken. The map saved Harry many times. Thankfully, it never fell into Death Eater's hands. Number 8. The pensieve. The pensieve shimmered with a surface like liquid silver. It looked calm, but it held storms. Dumbledore used it often, pulling thoughts from his mind like silk threads and placing them gently into the stone basin. It wasn't just storage, it was a door to the past. Step into it, and you didn't remember. You relived. Harry did just that. He fell into Severus Snape's memories and came out changed. He saw Lily's laughter, James's cruelty, and Snape's heartbreak. He heard the truth Dumbledore had hidden for so long. You have your mother's eyes. The words made sense at last. It wasn't just a compliment. It was a burden, a promise. The pensieve didn't lie or twist. It showed things as they were, raw and unforgiving. But it was dangerous. In the wrong hands, it could expose secrets never meant to be seen. Weaknesses, regrets, love. Voldemort never used a pensieve, but if he had, he might have seen the pain he caused, or the pieces of soul he lost. Dumbledore once said, "The truth is a beautiful and terrible thing, and should therefore be treated with great caution." The pensieve made that truth unavoidable. Number 9. The Mirror of Erised. The Mirror of Erised stood tall and silent in a forgotten classroom. Its golden frame was carved with strange words. Erised stra ehru oit ube kafru oit on wosi. Read backward, it revealed its purpose. I show not your face, but your heart's desire. When Harry Potter first looked into it, he didn't see himself alone. He saw his parents. Lily smiled, James waved. For a boy who had never known family, it was everything. Ron Weasley saw something different. He stood tall, older, with a shiny badge on his chest and the Quidditch cup in his hands. In the mirror, he wasn't just the friend of Harry Potter, he was someone. The mirror showed what they wanted most, what they craved deep in their souls. But it didn't give, it only reflected. As Dumbledore later warned, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Some students might have stared at it forever, lost in illusion, hungry for a world they could never touch. Dumbledore moved the mirror for that reason. He knew its danger. He had seen it too. He told Harry, "I too once looked into the mirror. I saw myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks." But Harry later realized that wasn't the truth. Dumbledore had lost just as much as he had. The mirror didn't lie, but it never gave back. Number 10, the Sword of Gryffindor. The Sword of Gryffindor was no ordinary blade. Forged by the Goblin King Ragnarok I, it gleamed with silver light and rubies in the hilt. But its true magic ran deeper. It absorbed what made it stronger. When Harry killed the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, the venom soaked into the blade. That moment changed everything. The sword became one of the few weapons in the wizarding world capable of destroying Horcruxes. It never needed to be carried. It appeared when it was truly needed. When Neville Longbottom pulled it from the sorting hat and cut off Nagini's head, he wasn't just swinging metal. He was answering destiny. Only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that out of the hat, Dumbledore once told Harry. The sword didn't follow orders. It followed courage. Severus Snape hid the sword during the Second Wizarding War. He placed a copy in Bellatrix's vault and the real one deep in the forest. But when Harry, Ron and Hermione needed it most, it appeared. Cold water, frozen pond. Harry dove in, risked his life, and the sword came to him, not as a prize, but as a test. Only those who proved their bravery could wield the weapon that once belonged to Godric Gryffindor himself. Number 11, Floo powder. Floo powder didn't look like magic. It looked like dust, grey, messy, easy to spill. But once tossed into a fireplace, it turned green and alive. The flames roared, cool instead of hot. All you had to do was step in, speak your destination, and let the magic carry you. It was quick, efficient, and terrifying the first time you tried it. When Harry Potter used Floo powder for the first time, he was just 12. He stood in the fireplace at the burrow, clutching the powder in his hand. "Diagon Alley!" he shouted, but the ash choked his words, and the name came out all wrong. In the blink of an eye, he wasn't in Diagon Alley. He was tumbling into the darkness of Nocturne Alley, face first into Borgin and Burke's, a shop filled with cursed artifacts and whispering shadows. He landed hard, alone, surrounded by skulls and dark magic. "You lost, boy?" came a voice from behind the shelves. It wasn't an adventure, it was a warning. Floo travel required precision. One mispronounced word could change everything. Dumbledore once said, "Words are, in my not-so-humble opinion, our most inexhaustible source of magic." With Floo powder, they were also a compass, and one wrong syllable could turn safety into danger. Even adults feared a slip of the tongue. The system was trusted but never perfect. That's why witches and wizards often practiced the names of locations before entering the flames, because no matter how harmless the powder looked, it wasn't the ash that burned, it was the journey. Number 12. Mad-Eye Moody's Eye. Mad-Eye Moody's magical eye never blinked. It rolled constantly in every direction, seeing through wood, stone, and lies. It could pierce walls, watch through the back of his head, and even see through invisibility cloaks. That wasn't just impressive, it was terrifying. Moody relied on it during his years as an aura. No one could sneak up on him, no one could hide. The eye was his weapon and his warning, but after Mad-Eye's death in the Deathly Hallows, the eye ended up in the worst hands possible. Dolores Umbridge. She mounted it in her office door at the Ministry of Magic, using it to spy on her staff like a trophy of dominance. The way she displayed it, cold and lifeless, was a mockery. The eye that once stood for vigilance now served fear. Harry couldn't leave it there. During their infiltration of the Ministry, he saw it, recognized it, and knew what he had to do. He stole the eye back, not for strategy, for respect, for Mad-Eye. "I'm sorry," Harry whispered, later burying it beneath a nameless tree. It wasn't a grand funeral, but it was sacred, a silent gesture to honor the dead. That eye had watched over a lifetime of battles. It had seen through disguises, lies, and shadows. It had trusted only a few. And when it was finally laid to rest, it was not just a buried object, it was the end of an era. The world had lost one of its fiercest protectors, and Harry, in his quiet act, made sure the last piece of Mad-Eye didn't remain in the hands of tyranny. Number 13, the Golden Snitch. The Golden Snitch was no ordinary ball. Small, fast, and nearly impossible to catch, it zipped through the air with silver wings and a mind of its own. In Quidditch, it ended games and crowned heroes. But what few realized was that it also remembered. The snitch had what wizards called flesh memory. It recognized the first person who touched it with bare skin and held that imprint forever. Albus Dumbledore knew this. That's why he chose the snitch as the perfect hiding place. Before his death, he instructed that one of the snitches Harry had caught during a match be given to him, not just as a keepsake, but as a vessel. Inside it, hidden beyond sight and locked behind ancient magic, was the Resurrection Stone. A piece of the Deathly Hallows, a symbol of power, loss, and fate. When Harry received it, the snitch didn't open, not to spells, not to force. It remained closed, stubborn, and silent. But it wasn't waiting for a command, it was waiting for a moment. In the Forbidden Forest, walking toward death, Harry finally spoke the words Dumbledore had etched into its metal. "I open at the close," the snitch responded. It recognized his touch, it opened, and the stone fell into his hand. The snitch had carried more than a message. It carried the weight of trust. Dumbledore had known Harry would find courage not through magic, but through sacrifice. That tiny golden ball had held the last gift of the headmaster, not just a relic, but a final chance to see his parents, Sirius and Remus, before the end. The crowd once cheered when Harry caught the snitch on the Quidditch pitch, but in the forest it was silent, no cheers, only the soft sound of wings folding back. Number 14, the Goblet of Fire. The Goblet of Fire stood in the great hall, flickering with blue flames, calm and silent. But behind that calm shimmered power, not just any power, but the kind that binds fate. To the students it looked like a trophy, something ceremonial. To those who knew better, it was a binding force, ancient and magical. The goblet is an impartial judge, Dumbledore warned. Once a champion's name is selected, there's no turning back. When Harry Potter's name burst from its flames, the entire hall froze. He was only 14. He hadn't even submitted his name. No one could stop what followed. The goblet had made its choice, and its magic couldn't be undone. The goblet's magic is binding. It's a contract, said Barty Crouch Sr. sternly. Even the Ministry of Magic, with all its power and paranoia, could not overturn it. Not even Dumbledore, the most powerful wizard alive, could undo what had been set in motion. The Triwizard Tournament was meant for 17-year-olds, but because the goblet accepted Harry, he was forced into challenges that had already killed older and more experienced wizards in the past. The twist, of course, was that Harry never entered. It was Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, who tricked the goblet with a confundus charm. "I was the one who put your name in that goblet, Harry," he later confessed. "I made it a fourth school." The goblet didn't know it was being tricked. It recognized only magical signatures and followed the ancient laws it was enchanted with, and because Harry's name was in that flame, the tournament became a trap, a well-set trap for a boy who was never supposed to be a part of it. That moment changed everything. What should have been a traditional magical competition turned into a carefully orchestrated plan by Voldemort's follower to deliver Harry into a resurrection ritual. The Goblet of Fire, meant to bring glory, instead brought Harry to a graveyard. Cedric Diggory died there, Voldemort rose again, and all of it began with a name thrown into blue flame. One enchanted object, one decision, and no way back. Number 15, Tom Riddle's diary. It looked like nothing, a small, battered black diary with no name on the cover, forgotten in the chaos of school supplies and second-hand textbooks. Yet within its unassuming pages lived a fragment of one of the darkest wizards the magical world had ever known. The diary of Tom Riddle was not just an object, it was a trap, a prison, and a weapon. Created by Lord Voldemort, or rather the boy who once called himself Tom Marvolo Riddle, it represented his first step into the forbidden art of Horcruxes. Its purpose was clear, to preserve a sliver of his soul so he might live on even in death. But its method was far more insidious, for it preyed on innocence, fed on emotion, and disguised itself as a friend. When Ginny Weasley first came across the diary, she was just a first year, uncertain and desperate to find her place at Hogwarts. The diary promised her companionship, understanding, and someone to confide in. She poured her heart into it, her fears, her embarrassments, her insecurities. And in return, Tom Riddle responded. He was sympathetic, kind, attentive. He listened without judgment and made her believe he truly cared. In truth, he was studying her, learning from her every word how best to manipulate her. The diary, animated by a piece of Voldemort's soul, grew stronger the more she wrote. Ginny, unaware of the danger, gave him everything. But the diary wanted more than words. It wanted control. "I've been stealing into Ginny's soul for months now," Riddle revealed later in the Chamber of Secrets. "Little by little, day by day, Ginny poured out her soul to me, and her soul happened to be exactly what I wanted." The connection between them deepened, not through trust, but through domination. Ginny began to lose time, waking in places she didn't remember going, covered in chicken feathers or standing in front of flooded bathrooms. Strange messages began appearing on the walls of Hogwarts. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. Ginny was terrified but couldn't understand why. The truth was too horrible to imagine that her own hand had written them. Riddle used Ginny's body like a puppet. Through her, he unleashed the basilisk hidden in the depths of the castle, petrifying students and terrifying the school. He used her to open the Chamber of Secrets, an act only the true heir of Slytherin could perform. He fed on her energy, draining her life to strengthen his own phantom form. Ginny grew pale, weak and frightened, but still clung to the diary, unable to resist its pull. In a twisted sense, she had become its vessel, a living conduit for a boy who had ceased to be human long ago. The genius of the diary lay in its camouflage. There were no enchanted jewels, no ominous glow, just paper and ink, a vessel of memory and deception. Even Hermione Granger, the brightest witch of her age, did not immediately suspect such a device. For who would think a teenage girl's journal could be a container of dark magic? That was the brilliance of Voldemort's creation. He didn't hide his soul in grand artifacts alone. He understood that fear often lies in the ordinary. A diary is intimate, trusted, safe, and that's what made it deadly. When Harry finally encountered the diary, he too felt its pull. After rescuing it from Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, he discovered its ability to write back. Riddle's inked replies came to life, guiding Harry through a false narrative of Hogwarts' past. Tom showed him Hagrid and a monstrous spider, subtly planting doubt and misdirection. But what was most chilling was Riddle's calm, precise manipulation. "I'm very glad to see you, Harry Potter," he wrote, revealing his identity not as a ghost, but as a memory brought to life by dark magic. The boy in the diary was not a reflection, but a living shadow. When Ginny was finally taken into the Chamber of Secrets, it wasn't for mischief or revenge, it was for the final act. Her life was nearly drained, her soul almost consumed. Riddle had grown strong enough to speak, to walk, to threaten. He stood before Harry as a 17-year-old boy with no eyes for mercy. "She won't wake," he said coldly, "not unless I want her to." And in that moment, the diary was no longer just a tool. It was a living monster, the echo of a boy who had murdered his own humanity to chase immortality. The duel between Harry and Riddle in the chamber was more than a battle of wands. It was a clash between light and shadow, between memory and reality. Armed only with Godric Gryffindor's sword and the help of Fawkes the Phoenix, Harry faced not Voldemort, but the boy he once was, intelligent, elegant, and ice-cold. But it was not a spell that ended the diary's reign. It was a fang. A single fang from the basilisk pierced the pages, unleashing a scream from the diary as it spilled black ink like blood. The Horcrux was destroyed, the soul fragment inside shattered. Ink spurted out thick and fast, coating the diary, and then, silent as a shadow, Tom Riddle was gone. The symbolism was clear. A book meant for writing secrets now bleeding its own. A vessel of memories silenced forever. The basilisk's fang was more than a weapon, it was poetic justice. The very creature Riddle used to instill fear became the instrument of his own undoing. The diary did not burn or vanish. It lay torn and lifeless, an object robbed of its terrible magic. And Ginny, unconscious but alive, was freed from its hold. Number 16, the quill of acceptance. Hidden in the quiet shadows of Hogwarts, somewhere behind thick stone walls and towering bookcases, lies one of the school's oldest and most mysterious magical artifacts, the quill of acceptance and the book of admittance. Few students ever hear of it. Fewer still ever see it. Yet it is this silent, enchanted duo that decides the course of their lives before they can speak their first word. The quill, slender and pale, glows faintly with an otherworldly sheen. its feather shimmering as though made of frozen smoke. It rests beside the massive ancient tome, which appears to be bound in dragon hide and locked with no visible keyhole. The two are never touched by human hands. No professor has ever lifted the quill. No headmaster has ever turned a single page of the book. And yet, generation after generation, names are written down. The quill does not write upon command, nor does it respond to prophecy, bloodline, or influence. It is utterly impartial, its will more absolute than any law the Ministry of Magic could pass. As soon as a magical child is born in the British Isles, the quill scratches their name into the book with a faint, silvery whisper, provided the magic within the child is strong enough to be noticed. And if the name appears in the book, it means one thing only: Hogwarts will one day call. Not even Albus Dumbledore, who once held all the secrets of the school close to his chest, claimed to understand the enchantments that powered the quill. When asked, he merely said, "Some magics are older than history and wiser than any wizard." Alive. This strange, sentient artifact had never been fooled. It could not be manipulated by magical interference, nor deceived by disguise or illusion. When the book remained closed and the quill still, it meant there was no spark within the child. But when it opened and began to write, that spark had flared bright enough for the ancient enchantment to recognize. The precision of the quill became painfully clear in the case of Neville Longbottom. His family had long feared he was a squib. For years he had shown no magical ability. His grandmother Augusta, formidable and proud, had worried he would never receive his Hogwarts letter. Yet the quill had written his name within minutes of his birth. His magic had simply been dormant. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when this history was recounted, it became evident that the quill knew more than people did, more than even the child's family. "He could have been the chosen one, you know," Dumbledore had once told Harry, explaining that both he and Neville had fit the prophecy. The most astonishing part is that nobody, not even the founders of Hogwarts themselves, is known to have created the quill or the book. The artifacts simply exist, their origin lost to time. The common belief among scholars is that they are relics from an era even older than the founders, possibly relics of raw primal magic, far before structure and curriculum domesticated the art. What kind of wizard or what force of nature could enchant a feather and a book to work for 1,000 years without maintenance, instruction, or mistake? Some believe it was Merlin himself. Others whisper that it was not a wizard at all, but magic itself, taking form. In the tales of Beadle the Bard, a subtle reference is made to a book that writes without a scribe, but no one has confirmed if this is connected to the Book of Admittance. What is known is that the book has never once rejected a name written by the quill. If the ink marks the page, there is no debate. The child is magical. Even Severus Snape, born to a Muggle father and raised in a bleak home, devoid of warmth, was listed at birth. Despite the circumstances of his upbringing, the quill marked him for Hogwarts, sensing the depths of his magical potential long before he first opened a potions book or cast a spell in frustration. The case of Marvolo Gaunt is perhaps the most chilling validation of the artifact's judgment. Born into a decaying pure bloodline known for madness and cruelty, Marvolo displayed so little magical ability as a child that her father, Marvolo Gaunt, believed she was a squib. She was beaten and humiliated, treated as worthless, but the quill had known better. Her name was in the book. And when she finally attended Hogwarts, her talents, though never dazzling, were quietly present. Marvolo's later life was tragic, but her legacy shaped the fate of the entire wizarding world. Her son, Tom Marvolo Riddle, Voldemort, would not have existed if the Book of Admittance had not accepted her. That name, too, Tom Marvolo Riddle, was written by the quill, glowing eerily in the heavy silence of the Hall of Records. It did not care that he was the child of a Muggle father. It knew only that his power would one day erupt. In more recent memory, the quill also proved itself infallible with Hermione Granger. Born to two non-magical parents, she had no magical heritage to speak of, no legacy or ancestry that would predict her abilities, and yet the quill had no hesitation. Her name was etched into the book the very moment she let out her first cry in a Muggle hospital. Years later, she would become the brightest witch of her age, proving again that the quill's instinct is flawless. The Sorting Hat, with all its intelligence and insight, may debate and ponder, but the quill never. Doubts. Number 17, Marvolo Gaunt's ring. The ring lay hidden in the ruins of a forgotten house, buried under the weight of its blood-stained history. It belonged to the Gaunt family, descendants of Salazar Slytherin, and bore the mark of a legacy long corrupted by madness, isolation, and a thirst for purity of blood. On its blackened surface shimmered a strange triangular symbol etched with ancient lines, the Deathly Hallows. But this was not just any relic from the past. It was the fusion of two of the most powerful and dangerous magics the wizarding world had ever known, a Horcrux crafted by Lord Voldemort, and the Resurrection Stone, one of the three mythical Hallows. In this single, cursed object, Voldemort's dark soul met the oldest legend of wizard-kind. Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts, and perhaps the most gifted wizard of his age, discovered the ring in the shattered remnants of the Gaunt hovel. He had long sought to uncover and destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes, those twisted containers of soul fragments. But when he uncovered the ring, a deeper longing overtook his disciplined mind. It wasn't the Horcrux's evil magic that drew him in. It was the faint glimmer of the Resurrection Stone nestled within the signet, promising a chance to see again those he had lost. Kendra, Ariana. His sister's name weighed most heavily on his heart, for her death was tangled with his youthful arrogance and ambition. In a moment of vulnerability, Dumbledore slipped the ring onto his finger, and the consequence was immediate. The curse of the Horcrux, designed to kill and maim any who dared tamper with Voldemort's secrets, surged through his hand like fire. The flesh blackened, necrotized almost instantly. Pain tore through his body, not just physically but spiritually, an echo of the soul it contained pressing into his own. He was dying. Even someone of Dumbledore's magical power could not stop the curse. Only Severus Snape's swift intervention, using the darkest branches of healing magic, could slow its spread and grant Dumbledore the time he needed to finish what he had begun, the final war against Voldemort. The ring became a tragic symbol, one of temptation, love, and irrevocable error. It is easy to judge Dumbledore for his moment of weakness, for yielding to the ancient story of the three brothers and the whispered hope of resurrection. But even the wisest are not immune to grief. "I was such a fool, Harry," Dumbledore would later admit, his voice tinged with regret. "I was tempted by the ring. I thought I could use it, not to bring back the dead, but to see them. Once more, and I was punished for my presumption." The ring had done what all dark magic eventually does. It turned a noble intention into a fatal flaw. Voldemort, for his part, had no idea of the deeper magic concealed in the object he desecrated. Obsessed with immortality and incapable of grasping love or sacrifice, he used the Gaunt ring not for resurrection, but as a vessel for a fragment of his soul. He embedded it with a deadly curse and placed it as a trap in the Gaunt family ruins, never realizing that he had laid hands on one of the most coveted magical artifacts of all time. The Resurrection Stone, a gift from Death himself according to legend, was now a prisoner inside a Horcrux. Voldemort's arrogance blinded him to what he held. He had searched for the Elder Wand, the second Hallow, and failed to understand that the stone was already his. That irony marked much of Voldemort's downfall, an inability to see beyond power. The very object that could have shown him the depth of human feeling, that might have stirred some buried empathy or remembrance of love, was twisted by him into an instrument of fear and death. Meanwhile, Dumbledore, in a moment of yearning, recognized the stone for what it was, but it was too late. The magic had already lashed back. His hand was ruined. His fate was sealed. This duality makes the ring uniquely terrifying. It is both relic and weapon, both hope and doom. On one side, it calls to the human heart with the promise of reunion, of reconciliation with the dead. On the other, it carries the mark of a man who split his soul into 7 to escape death, leaving behind a trail of murder and anguish. The magic of the resurrection stone, gentle and sorrowful in its origin, became polluted when joined with Voldemort's malice. It's as if the ring was caught in a war of opposing forces, ancient purity and modern corruption battling for control. When Harry Potter eventually comes into possession of the resurrection stone, hidden inside the snitch bequeathed to him by Dumbledore, he does not seek to wield it as a weapon. He uses it only in the final moments before he walks into the forest to die. "You'll stay with me?" he asks his parents, Sirius and Lupin, their spirits summoned not into flesh but into memory, into the echo of presence the stone allows. Unlike Dumbledore, he seeks no power from the dead, only courage. And unlike Voldemort, he does not desecrate the gift. When the time comes, he drops the ring, the stone, into the forest floor, leaving it behind as it should have been long ago. The ring's original owner, Marvolo Gaunt, boasted of its bloodline rather than its magic. "The Peverell coat of arms," he insisted, ignorant of the true power embedded within. He saw it as a mark of status, a sign of descent from Slytherin rather than the ancient relic it was. This blindness continued down the line, from Morphin Gaunt to Tom Riddle, who viewed the ring only as a trophy and later as a vessel. Generations of wizards failed to grasp what they held, and each paid a price for their misunderstanding. Dumbledore, ironically, may have been the only one to see both the danger and the wonder of it, and even he, the great headmaster, faltered in the face of its silent lure. Number 18, Newt Scamander's magical suitcase. Newt Scamander's suitcase, with its weathered leather and modest appearance, might seem like any old travel companion at first glance. But as every seasoned witch and wizard knows, it is a vessel of extraordinary magic, a deceptively humble artifact that contains worlds within. The suitcase is not merely a container, it is a marvel of spellwork, expanded internally through complex, undetectable extension charms and imbued with transfiguration enchantments that allow it to shift its outer form. While it has the look of a scuffed and scratched case, the interior tells a different story, a sprawling sanctuary for magical creatures from across the globe, complete with distinct biomes, a fully functioning workshop, and intimate, hidden corners where the wizard can rest, reflect, and heal. Inside this suitcase lies a wilderness that defies spatial understanding. There is a foggy moor that feels like the Scottish Highlands, a sun-drenched savanna crackling with magical energy, and an Arctic dome blanketed with enchanted snow that never melts. Each region is tailored precisely for the inhabitants within it, from the glowing blue bowtruckles in their bark-covered thickets to the swooping, mischievous nifflers with their shimmering hordes. Newt has, in essence, created a portable preserve, a travelling Eden for the endangered and misunderstood beings that the magical world too often sees as threats. The very existence of such a construct reflects the ideals that Newt lives by: compassion, curiosity, and reverence for the natural magical world. The charm work required to maintain this level of interior complexity is not only remarkable but verging on revolutionary. Wizards in the Department of Magical Transportation might be familiar with expanding tents or enchanted storage cabinets, but few have achieved such harmony between magical architecture and ecological preservation. "It's much more than a suitcase," Tina Goldstein once observed, marveling at the dimensional depth of the place. "The layers of spells must be refreshed constantly, climate control for the Thunderbird storm chamber, concealment barriers for shy mooncalves, and habitat stabilization for the skittish graphorns, whose mountainous terrain floats impossibly, on levitation, charms anchored deep within the core of the suitcase. The artifact has also been charmed to alter its external appearance on command, or when danger demands it. In the 1926 chaos of New York City, the suitcase famously shifted into Muggle-worthy inspection mode during a customs check, revealing only mundane contents: a pair of socks, some travel brochures, and a toothbrush. The transformation was so convincing that it passed through security with barely a glance, and yet just hours later that same suitcase would unleash pandemonium in a bank lobby when a curious niffler escaped, scattering gold coins and jewelry across the polished floors as startled customers screamed and scrambled. It was one of many moments where the suitcase's inner magic leaked into a world unprepared to handle it. Perhaps the most iconic moment showcasing the suitcase's true nature occurred when Jacob Kowalski, a no-mage and aspiring baker, first fell into it by accident. His plunge into the enchanted interior did not result in injury, but rather astonishment. The look on his face as he beheld the sprawling biomes, glowing with life and humming with magical tension, remains one of the most telling symbols of how wondrous and dangerous this artifact is. "I don't think I'm dreaming," Jacob muttered, dazed by the impossible reality around him. He wasn't. For Newt, this suitcase wasn't a convenience. It was his life's work, his home, and his deepest responsibility. The suitcase, however, is also a liability. On more than one occasion, its magical properties have drawn unwanted attention. When Credence Barebones Obscurus tore through New York, the American wizarding authorities had already been on high alert due to the suitcase's role in earlier disturbances. In fact, Serafina Pickery, the president of MACUSA at the time, nearly confiscated and destroyed the artifact entirely. For magical governments, artifacts of such scale and ambiguity walk the dangerous line between brilliance and threat. "You've broken several laws," she reminded Newt coldly. And while his passion was admirable, the danger of the suitcase falling into the wrong hands was very real. Even Grindelwald, in his various disguises, recognized the suitcase's potential. At one point, disguised as Percival Graves, he tried to manipulate Newt by feigning interest in the creatures and their habitats, seeing in the suitcase not a conservation project, but a tactical advantage. Imagine if such a device were weaponized, used to transport armies, smuggle dark artifacts, or hide fugitives. Its portability and internal vastness make it a smuggler's dream. Fortunately, in Newt's hands, the suitcase remained a sanctuary, not a tool for destruction. But the line is thin, and the suitcase is only as safe as the integrity of its keeper. Each creature inside the suitcase is named, known, and deeply loved. The Thunderbird Frank was rescued in Egypt and required months of care before it could safely fly again. The Okami, with its chimerical beauty and space-filling abilities, nested in a chamber of enchanted bamboo which could stretch and compress alongside its magical growth spurts. The swooping evil, dangerous and elegant, had its own section with floating crystals that dampened its hypnotic aggression. These are not mere entries in a bestiary. They are living, breathing testaments to Newt's empathy and to the suitcase's role as a moral artifact, not just a magical one. The suitcase has a logic of its own, one that responds to Newt's emotional state and intentions. There are accounts, never officially recorded but whispered among magical naturalists, that the suitcase once locked itself when it sensed danger near. Another time it allegedly guided Newt toward a wounded erumpent through an internal shift of the biomes, rearranging its geography as if alive. Such accounts remain controversial, but anyone who has witnessed the suitcase in action would find it difficult to dismiss these stories out of hand. There's magic in that leather hide far deeper than mere space folding. Not every creature within the suitcase is passive or harmless. The murtlap, with its aggressive posture and regenerative tentacles, once latched onto Jacob and caused a temporary magical infection. Newt had to brew an urgent antidote from within his mobile laboratory. The Nundu, though young and docile, required constant surveillance due to its breath's toxic qualities. A single lapse could have spelled doom, not only for the inhabitants of the suitcase, but for the surrounding Muggle populations wherever Newt travelled. The balancing act between caretaking and containment is delicate and deadly. The artifact also contains a fully operational alchemical workshop where Newt creates salves, potions, and feed blends to care for his charges. This is where he crafted the calming elixirs for the stressed demi-guise, whose invisibility became unstable during the London incident. It is where he developed specialized heat-resistant gloves after being burned by a baby fire crab. The presence of such a workshop within a suitcase is a feat in itself, functional enchantment at the highest level, proof that magic, when guided by love and study, can defy not only space but expectation. Few magical objects blend utility with heart the way Newt's suitcase does. It is not just an object of convenience or invention, it is a sanctuary, a home, and a philosophy made real. It represents a vision of magic as nurturing rather than conquering. The suitcase could have been used to wage war, smuggle contraband, or serve dark purposes. Instead, it became a cradle for life, maintained not by legislation or oversight, but by one wizard's relentless kindness and dedication. In one of Newt's private field journals, a scribbled note reads, "Every creature has a place. It's my job to find it." The suitcase is that place, a portable Noah's Ark for the magical world, hidden in plain sight, held shut with buckles and hope. It rattles and hums when something's wrong. It glows faintly when a creature inside heals. It is alive not with breath, but with purpose. That is the truest form of magic, and that is why this suitcase, battered though it may be, is one of the wizarding world's greatest and most unsung artifacts. Number 19, the probity probe. In the shadowy recesses of the Ministry of Magic, behind sealed doors and beneath the gaze of enchanted chandeliers, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement holds a secret few wizards outside its ranks truly understand. Amid the more well-known tools of justice, veritaserum, magical contracts, and enchanted quills, there exists a lesser-known but deeply symbolic artifact, the Delphinor. Not an object sung about in wizarding history, nor one displayed in museums or discussed in Hogwarts textbooks, the Delphinor is quiet justice in motion, a spinning silver sentinel against falsehood. Its form is deceivingly simple, a miniature top forged of gleaming metal that never tarnishes, engraved with faint runes from an older magic that predates even the founders. But it is not its appearance that matters. It is the way it spins when truth is manipulated. For decades, the Delphinor was kept out of public eye, stored securely in a glass case in the department's interrogation chamber, C. Not many saw it, but those who did never forgot its eerie elegance. When placed on a table and activated with a tap of a wand and a whispered incantation, it would begin to spin in a lazy, rhythmic circle. If the speaker's words were true, the top continued in a slow, steady rotation. But should deceit seep into the sentence, the Delphinor would react, its spin accelerating, vibrating with a kind of inner fury, as though the object itself resented the lie. This magical device was most often used during high-level interrogations, especially those that occurred during the First Wizarding War. A known case involved Augustus Rookwood, a former unspeakable turned Death Eater. During a closed hearing in 1981, Rookwood sat across from Bartemius Crouch Sr., then head of the department. The Delphinor was placed between them. Rookwood claimed he had no knowledge of Lord Voldemort's inner circle. The Delphinor began to spin with a force that cracked the oak surface beneath it. It was later written in the Ministry's internal report that Rookwood's lies were so entangled with delusion and guilt that the Delphinor whirled like a dying star. And yet this case also revealed a flaw, one that would haunt the Delphinor's credibility for years to come. Some witches and wizards, it seemed, could deceive not only others, but also themselves. If a person truly believed their own lies, the Delphinor hesitated, its movements sluggish or unchanged. This wasn't a flaw of the artifact's enchantment, it was a consequence of how magic interacts with the mind. The Delphinor doesn't detect objective lies, it detects dissonance between belief and words. A gifted occlumen, someone trained in hiding thoughts and emotions, could render the Delphinor nearly useless, and therein lay the danger. Severus Snape, though never subjected to the Delphinor during known proceedings, was rumoured to have mastered occlumency to such a degree that the artifact wouldn't have flinched in his presence. Dumbledore himself hinted at this in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince when he explained that Snape had become a master of occlumency, skilled at hiding his thoughts even from the Dark Lord. It wasn't just Voldemort who failed to read Snape. The Ministry itself would have found nothing beneath his surface. Had he ever been questioned with the Delphinor in use, it might have sat there, still and innocent, while Snape manipulated truth like a puppet master. Another chilling example involved Dolores Umbridge, who in the early days of her appointment as senior undersecretary to the minister, oversaw several investigations into Muggle-born witches and wizards. During her interrogations, she insisted on the use of Veritaserum, claiming it was more effective than older artifacts like the Delphinor. But former ministry employee Arnold Peasgood later revealed that during an internal ethics review, Umbridge was herself subjected to the artifact. When asked whether she had authorized the use of dementors in Little Whinging, a question of grave consequence, the Delphinor did not move, not even a tremble. And yet, witnesses and later testimony from Arabella Figg confirmed that 2 dementors had indeed been sent, likely at Umbridge's command. The conclusion? Either she believed the lie, or had buried the truth so deeply, even her subconscious had forgotten it. The Delphinor's magic is believed to be older than the Ministry itself. Some historians trace its enchantment back to a circle of magical judges from the 12th century who used similar objects in village trials before the establishment of the Wizengamot. These early forms lacked precision and were often corrupted by emotional energy. An angry accuser could make the top spin faster just by proximity. But the modern Delphinor, refined through centuries of ritual magic and stabilized runes, became a reliable, if not infallible, tool. It was never used as standalone proof, but rather as corroborative evidence, a whisper of doubt or confirmation amid piles of testimony. The real question that emerged in later years was whether the Delphinor should be trusted at all. In a post-war era where magical ethics came under harsh scrutiny, its use declined sharply. Hermione Granger, as part of the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, once challenged the use of magical detection devices including the Delphinor. In her 2003 paper, Consciousness and Consent, the Fallibility of Magical Inference. She argued that tools like the Delphinor do not measure truth, but alignment between speech and self-perception. They are as vulnerable as the soul they attempt to judge. Her paper sparked intense debate and led to the Delphinor being removed from standard interrogation protocol. It is now reserved for internal investigations only. And even then, only when all participants consent. But for all its controversy, the Delphinor remains a potent symbol. It represents the wizarding world's desire for a clean line between truth and lie in a society where both can be bent with a wand or a will. Its very existence acknowledges a painful fact that truth is not always a magical constant. It can be hidden, reshaped, believed, or buried. The Delphinor doesn't punish lies, it reacts to conflict. In doing so, it becomes a mirror, not to objective reality, but to the mind's intricate maze. One of the more poetic tales associated with the Delphinor came from a retired auror named Tiberius Flint. In a rare interview published in the Daily Prophet in 2010, he recounted an encounter with a young wizard suspected of aiding dark creatures in illegal magical dueling rings. The boy, no older than 16, sat across the table from Flint, his eyes calm. "I only wanted to protect them," he had said. The Delphinor remained slow, steady. Flint had expected a flurry, but the artifact stayed composed. Later, evidence revealed the boy had indeed offered sanctuary to a pair of rogue werewolves, but had not profited from them or harmed anyone. He had believed, sincerely, that he was doing good. "That was the day I stopped calling it a lie detector," Flint admitted. "It's a conscience reader." That nuance is essential to understanding the Delphinor's place in magical lore. It is not a sledgehammer of truth, it is a scalpel of insight. It cannot convict on its own, nor can it absolve. But it can raise questions that even legilimency might miss. It can detect internal war, moral greyness, and dissonance hidden under rehearsed words. And in a world where magic can twist reality, such a device is both dangerous and necessary. The artifact's name, curiously, comes not from Latin or Greek, but from an old Celtic term, Delphinor, which translates roughly to the breath of silver. The name was first recorded in the magical lexicon of the Scottish wizard Branwen Thistlethwaite, who claimed the object could spin truth from the air and sing when the soul is heavy. The singing part has since been dismissed as poetic exaggeration, but the idea that the Delphinor interacts not just with language, but with emotion, remains an accepted theory among magical scholars. There is something haunting about the Delphinor's legacy. It was never corrupted like the Horcruxes, never stolen like the Deathly Hallows, never glorified like the Triwizard Cup, and yet its power is arguably more intimate. It doesn't take lives, it reveals lives, it doesn't give immortality, it gives perspective. Perhaps that is why it remains hidden, because to see the Delphinor at work is to confront uncomfortable questions not only about others, but about oneself. In the end, it is not surprising that the Delphinor never became famous. It does not shine with legend or roar with power, but within the quiet spin of its silver form lies one of the wizarding world's oldest truths, that magic can sense us, but it cannot always save us from ourselves, and that sometimes the greatest illusions are the ones we cast upon our own minds. Number 20, the Wizarding Wireless Network Radio. It looked like an ordinary piece of junk, dusty, dented, and forgotten in the corner of a dimly lit room. To a passing muggle it might have seemed like nothing more than a battered old radio, its knobs stiff from years of disuse, its wires tangled like roots beneath a forest floor. But in the world of wizards, appearances often deceive, and this forgotten device was far from obsolete. It was the beating heart of the magical underground, a beacon of hope and a weapon of resistance. Known simply as the Wizarding Wireless Relay, or more specifically, the radio transmitter used for Potterwatch, it served as a lifeline for those clinging to truth when the wizarding world descended into darkness. During the height of the Second Wizarding War, when fear had settled like smoke over every street and square, and when even Hogwarts itself had fallen into shadow, the Order of the Phoenix realized that they needed more than wands and duels. They needed information, they needed stories, names, facts, rumors, truth. Voldemort's rise was accompanied by a campaign of terror and silence, and the Ministry, fully corrupted, had become a mouthpiece for lies. It wasn't enough to fight in alleyways or defend ancient halls. They needed to break through the fog of misinformation and reach the isolated, the afraid, the hidden. That's when the dusty radio turned into a sacred artifact. It was Lee Jordan, once known for his playful Quidditch commentary at Hogwarts, who took up the mantle of broadcaster for the Resistance. From secret locations that changed often and urgently, he used the bewitched radio device to host Potterwatch, a magical program that defied the Ministry's narrative and brought real news to witches and wizards across Britain. It's important, Lee once explained in the program, to give people the facts when so many are being lied to. His voice, once loud and excitable, became calm and resolute. The radio became his wand, his words, his spells. The radio was no ordinary broadcasting device. It had been enchanted to respond only to a specific password, a magical safeguard against Death Eater eavesdropping. Each broadcast required a new code word, whispered from one rebel to the next, like a chain of resistance woven through whispers and shadows. The password is Albus, one might say quietly, in his safe house, and the radio, previously silent, would hum to life, casting a protective charm over all who listened. The device did not pick up Muggle stations. It wasn't even detectable by Muggle equipment. It existed entirely in the magical frequency, tuned not just by mechanics, but by intent and belief. Fred and George Weasley, no strangers to mischief, used their shop's back rooms to help Lee with securing the equipment. Kingsley Shacklebolt ensured safe locations were available in Muggle homes protected by Fidelius charms. Remus Lupin contributed intel gathered in the field, passing along news of disappearances, movements of snatchers, and the fate of those who dared to resist. Every broadcast was dangerous, every whisper of truth potentially lethal, but they continued because silence was not an option. "The truth," Lee said in one episode, "is more powerful than 1,000 spells." In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the radio appears during the trio's painful, nomadic journey through forests and abandoned places. The first time they hear it, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are huddled in their tent, defeated and hungry for hope. "And now over to our main feature, Potter Watch," said the voice on the radio. And suddenly, the world opened. It was a connection to life beyond their exile. It was proof that they were not alone. Harry sat in silence, listening to familiar voices: Lee, Kingsley, codenamed Royal, Lupin, Romulus, and even Fred, Rapier. They spoke of the fall of Scrimgeour, the bravery of Ted Tonks, and the lies of the new regime. They said Harry's name with reverence and trust as a symbol, not just a boy. The magical radio offered something more potent than news. It offered identity. In a time when names were taboo, when Voldemort's name itself triggered deadly traps, Potter Watch dared to name names. It called out Death Eaters. It honored the fallen. It defied fear with clarity. "The Ministry has fallen. Scrimgeour is dead. They are coming," were the final words broadcasted before the trio went on the run. That moment changed everything. From then on, every time they turned the dial, they weren't just hoping for survival. They were participating in something larger. What made the radio an artifact was not its enchantments alone, but its transformation into a vessel of resistance. It channeled not only magic, but courage. Like the enchanted mirrors Sirius once gave Harry, or the Marauder's map, or even the Deluminator, it belonged to the realm of magical tools that bound people together across time and space. The voice over the radio was a guiding star in a night sky of fear, reminding listeners that while Voldemort controlled the institutions, he did not control their minds. And yet every broadcast carried danger. There were rumors that the Death Eaters had developed counter-charms, that they were tracing the magical frequencies, that any listener caught with the device activated would be labeled a traitor and executed. But people still listened. Entire families gathered around radios hidden behind portrait frames and false walls. Children memorized the code names of their heroes: Royal, River, Rapier. In those moments, the war became real, but so did the resistance. The symbolism was clear. While Voldemort sought control through fear and silencing dissent, the Order fought back with the simplest yet most profound magic: truth told aloud. Potter Watch was never flashy. It didn't carry spells or show duels. It carried words. It carried names. It reminded wizards and witches that they had the right to question, to doubt, and most importantly, to hope. When Harry first turned the dial and heard Fred's familiar voice, his reaction was not just nostalgia, it was relief. The world hadn't ended. People were still fighting. His name, dragged through the mud in the Daily Prophet, was being redeemed by those who knew the truth. "They've got that wrong," Fred's voice joked. "Harry is still alive, last we heard. No thanks to the Ministry." That simple sentence was a magical act. It undid 100 lies. In retrospect, the radio was a subtle rebellion. Unlike the Sword of Gryffindor or the Elder Wand, it didn't glow with ancient power or bear legendary runes, but it changed hearts. It allowed the scattered to feel seen, the wounded to feel understood, the frightened to feel brave. In a world where curses flew and betrayals loomed, it offered constancy, like a Patronus made of sound. The ministry tried to suppress it. Umbridge had long ago restricted press freedoms, and after the coup, the new regime considered unauthorized magical broadcasting a criminal act. Lee Jordan became a wanted man, posters were printed, his name added to the lists, but no cell could hold a voice, and his voice kept slipping through the cracks. "To all our listeners out there," he would say, "keep your wands close and your hearts closer." Even after the fall of Voldemort, the radio remained. It became a relic, a teaching tool. At Hogwarts, Professor McGonagall reportedly kept a replica in her office, enchanted to play old broadcasts. Students gathered around it to hear the history, not from books, but from the voices of those who lived it. It reminded them that power lies not only in might, but in message, that speaking truth, even into the void, is itself a form of magic. Years later, when George Weasley told stories to young witches and wizards about the war, he often spoke not just of duels or Horcruxes, but of that old dusty radio. "We beat them," he said once, "not just with wands, but with words, with laughter, with hope. Sometimes all it takes is a voice in the dark." And so the radio became more than metal and spell work. It became memory, it became resistance, it became magic. Number 21, the two-way mirror. There were many magical items in Harry Potter's world that dazzled the imagination. Time turners, invisibility cloaks, marauders' maps. But some, though less famous, held just as much power in their quiet mystery. The two-way mirror, gifted to Harry by Sirius Black, belonged to that second category. A magical artifact not praised in wizarding textbooks, not chased by dark wizards, and never even properly explained. And yet its emotional gravity lingered in the story far longer than many more powerful magical devices. It wasn't a weapon or a tool of great strategy. It was simply a mirror, humble in appearance, but carrying with it the unbearable weight of loss and the echo of a conversation that never happened. Sirius gave Harry the mirror in Order of the Phoenix, but he did so with such haste and secrecy that its importance got lost in the emotional whirlwind of their final moments together. "Use it if you need me," Sirius had said, handing Harry a square package before their rushed farewell at the end of term. Harry didn't even open it until much later, a decision that would haunt him. Inside was the half of a mirror, simple and unadorned with no inscriptions or warnings. Harry didn't recognize its power because Sirius never explained it. In fact, the mirror itself had no instructions at all, just that vague assurance that it could summon Sirius if needed. The tragedy of the two-way mirror lies not in its failure to work, but in Harry's failure to use it. After Sirius's death in the Department of Mysteries, Harry opened the package again and looked into the glass, desperate, broken, hoping against hope to see a flicker of his godfather's face. Instead, all he saw was his own reflection, pale with grief. That mirror could have saved Sirius's life, or at least allowed one final conversation. But it remained silent, a mute observer to Harry's torment. He had the means to call out, but never used it until it was too late. There's a cruel irony in that silence. In truth, the two-way mirror was one of the simplest yet most profound pieces of magic in the entire series. Unlike the Floo network, which required fireplaces and powder, or Patronus messages, which were difficult and advanced, the mirror had no complex setup. All it required was its pair. When one person looked into their mirror and called the other's name, the other would appear face to face as though the distance between them collapsed. It was magical communication reduced to pure human connection. No frills, no theatrics, just eyes meeting eyes across space. J.K. Rowling never gave the mirror a proper spotlight, and perhaps that was intentional. Its quiet presence served more as a symbol than a plot device. Unlike the Elder Wand or the Resurrection Stone, the mirror didn't carry with it a history of bloodshed or power. Its story was one of intimacy, of longing, of missed opportunities. When Harry first realized what the mirror could do, he was struck by regret. He had wanted to talk to Sirius during the year, but had feared exposing him to danger. The irony was cruel. The mirror would have allowed that contact safely, without using owls, without messages, without risk. A conversation could have happened if only he had known. In Deathly Hallows, the mirror resurfaces in a fragmentary way. Harry finds a shard of the broken mirror in the bottom of his school trunk, and it becomes a kind of talisman, something he clings to in moments of desperation. Later, in Malfoy Manor, he glimpses a blue eye watching him from that fragment. For a fleeting moment, he believes it is Dumbledore, but the eye belongs to Aberforth, Dumbledore's brother, who had acquired Sirius's other half of the mirror after his death. Through it, Aberforth is able to come to Harry's aid, sending Dobby to rescue him. So, in a roundabout way, the mirror does eventually fulfill its purpose: to connect, to protect, to bring help in moments of dire need. The emotional resonance of the two-way mirror lies not in its success, but in its failure to be used when it mattered most. Harry's guilt over Sirius's death becomes entwined with the mirror's unused magic. The glass becomes a symbol of what could have been, of the words unsaid and the silence that followed. It's the perfect metaphor for grief. It reflects not only the image of the person looking into it, but the ghost of the one who never answered. The quote that stands out from the series is short but powerful. He had Sirius's mirror still, but the other mirror had been destroyed. That line from Deathly Hallows is easily overlooked, but it tells a whole story in its brevity. The magic didn't die, the mirror still worked, but the connection was severed. One half was gone. One voice was silenced forever. The mirror could still reflect, but not the face Harry most wanted to see. Unlike the pensieve, which shows the past, or the mirror of erised, which shows desire, the two-way mirror shows presence. It is perhaps the most human of all magical objects, rooted in the basic need for contact. It is neither prophetic nor manipulative. It simply connects. That purity makes it all the more tragic when it is ignored, and that is why its magic feels so heartbreakingly real, because in life, we too often realize the importance of connection only when it is lost. Sirius, in his final days, knew he might not survive the war. Giving Harry the mirror was his way of staying close without putting either of them in danger. It was a lifeline disguised as a gift. But Sirius underestimated Harry's fear of exposing him, and Harry, overwhelmed with anxiety and the burdens of prophecy, simply forgot. It wasn't until after the final duel, after the veil had swallowed Sirius whole, that Harry realized the mirror had always been there, waiting, silent, capable of offering the one thing he now could never have again, a voice from beyond. There's something almost poetic in the mirror's journey. First it is given in hope, then ignored in fear, and finally shattered in sorrow. What remains is not a complete object, but a fragment, just as Harry's understanding of death and love becomes fragmented by the end of his 5th year. The mirror reflects not just images, but the brokenness of grief, the irreversible nature of death, and the painful lessons learned too late. The two-way mirror challenges the reader to consider what we leave unsaid. How often do we miss our chance to reach out? How often do we hold back, waiting for the right moment, only to find it never comes? In that sense, the mirror becomes a moral compass of sorts. It shows us the cost of silence, of assumption, of letting fear decide our choices. It is a quiet warning buried in a story of loud magic and loud wars. Its quietest moment may also be its most powerful. When Harry sees the blue eye in the shard during his imprisonment at Malfoy Manor, he doesn't understand how help will come, only that someone is watching. That glimpse of connection, one eye through broken glass, saves him. And that is the paradox of the mirror. Even broken, it still connects. Even in fragments, it still carries the spark of human presence. That's the kind of magic that doesn't fade. Not flashy, not famous, but eternal. It is tempting to wish the mirror had been used earlier, to rewrite the story and allow Sirius and Harry one final conversation. But that would undo the very lesson the mirror imparts. Grief, after all, is about absence, about understanding too late. The mirror had no curse, no hidden flaw. It simply obeyed the rules of magic. The tragedy was all too human. In the end, the mirror becomes a relic not just of Sirius, but of everything Harry loses. His parents, his godfather, his innocence. It remains in his possession like a quiet witness to it all, a frame without a picture, a line left unfinished. That it helps save him later is a kind of redemption, not of magic, but of memory. Not all spells can be cast. Some simply linger, silent, waiting, reflecting. Number 22, the music box. In the shadowed halls of Malfoy Manor, where the air was thick with secrecy and danger, a small, seemingly harmless object once played a melody that could melt the will of the strongest witch or wizard. This was no ordinary trinket, it was a music box, a Death Eater artifact, and though it looked like a quaint toy from a nursery, its tune held the power to bend the minds of its listeners. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, this hauntingly beautiful device revealed a truth about the magical world that many chose to ignore. In wizardry, danger often comes dressed in innocence. The music box wasn't large or adorned with jewels. It bore no runes of warning or sinister glow. Yet its power rivaled some of the darkest charms. Harry, Ron, and Hermione first encountered the box in a moment thick with tension. They had travelled to the house of Xenophilius Lovegood in search of understanding, of the Hallows, of the symbol they had seen carved into a grave, of the shifting alliances in the war that consumed their world. But what they found was treachery, cloaked in desperation. Xenophilius, driven mad by the loss of his daughter Luna, had contacted the Death Eaters in hopes of trading the trio for her release. And it was in this setting that the music box made its sinister entrance. With one twist of its key, the box began to emit a melody so gentle, so hypnotic, that the three young wizards were instantly affected. The melody within the box had a strange, soporific quality. They all felt their eyelids growing heavier, J.K. Rowling wrote, capturing the soft menace hidden within the delicate tune. The spell woven into the music wasn't a jarring hex or an aggressive jinx. It worked slowly, invisibly, wrapping itself around the mind like a silken ribbon. Hermione, ever the sharpest among them, recognized the effect first and acted quickly to snap them out of the trance. But the damage had been done, if only momentarily. In a war filled with explosive curses and screaming hexes, this weapon was as silent as it was effective. The box illustrated how subtlety could be more dangerous than spectacle, how a lullaby could become a battlefield tool. It was a reminder that in the world of wizards, even toys could be twisted into weapons. It's worth noting that the Death Eaters, known for their love of brutality and control, used such a delicate object. The music box reveals a psychological aspect to their warfare. It wasn't about destruction alone, it was about domination, about the slow erosion of resistance. The melody lulled its victims into complacency, bypassing their defenses without raising a wand. That strategy was cold, calculated, and deeply disturbing. The artifact didn't maim or wound, it sedated. In doing so, it removed autonomy, it silenced thought. This made it especially cruel, especially dark. A person entranced by the box would surrender without ever understanding why. Its origin remains a mystery, and perhaps that adds to its dread. Unlike other infamous magical items like the cursed opal necklace from Borgin and Burke's or the locket of Salazar Slytherin, this music box has no long-winded backstory, no legendary crafter, no storied journey through time. It exists, it works, and it terrifies. The absence of an origin suggests it could be easily replicated, that similar devices might be hidden in other wizarding homes or tucked into children's toy chests waiting to sing their victims to sleep. It's a discomforting thought that darkness doesn't always come from ancient evils, but from everyday objects twisted by intent. The musical magic embedded in the box evokes comparisons with the Imperious Curse. Both suppress the will, both encourage compliance, both rob the victim of choice. But where the Imperious Curse is overt, recognized, classified, and regulated, the box is not. It operates outside the known limits of magical law, a loophole in the ethical system. It can be used without incantations, without wand movement, without any visible sign of manipulation. That made it ideal for ambushes, for guarding doorways, for leaving traps in the homes of rebels and traitors. It is a quiet predator in a loud war. Hermione's reaction is perhaps the most revealing. She doesn't marvel at the object or express fear. She acts. She slams the lid shut. Her immediate recognition of the danger proves how well-versed she had become in the deceptive nature of dark magic. This also highlights an often overlooked aspect of magical education, its focus on the overt rather than the covert. At Hogwarts, students were taught to block curses, disarm opponents, and create protective enchantments. But little was taught about objects like this one, silent, unassuming, and devastating. The music box existed in the gaps of magical learning, a trap for the unprepared. There's poetry in the fact that a lullaby, something traditionally associated with safety, warmth, and childhood, could be corrupted into a weapon. In the hands of Death Eaters, even comfort was dangerous. This artifact forces us to question the symbolic power of sound in the wizarding world. What other melodies could hold magical properties? What songs might lull dragons, or pacify giants, or control crowds? The use of music as magic is a concept that appears rarely in the books but is no less potent, and in this case it is weaponized with chilling efficiency. The box may have only appeared briefly, but its implications echo far beyond Xenophilius Lovegood's crooked tower home. It reminds us that not all dangers in the magical world come with flashing lights and screams. Some come with a soft tune and the promise of sleep. In a war where every ally and enemy had to be judged in seconds, a moment's hesitation induced by a sleepy melody could mean the difference between life and death. The music box wasn't just a trap, it was a test of awareness, of resistance, of instinct. Dumbledore once warned that it is not our abilities that define us, but our choices. The music box removes choice, and that is perhaps its greatest evil. Unlike the killing curse, which ends life, or the Cruciatus curse, which inflicts pain, this device steals willpower. It neutralizes without confrontation. It makes victims complicit in their downfall, singing them to surrender. That makes it uniquely terrifying because it does not feel like an attack until it is too late. It seduces with calmness, whispers with beauty, and strikes through peace. The artifact also draws a line between the Death Eaters and other dark practitioners. Voldemort's followers did not merely seek power, they sought control over every corner of the magical experience. They didn't just fight on battlefields, they invaded dreams, distorted truths, and turned joy into danger. A music box weapon was not an accident. It was a statement that no part of life was sacred, not even lullabies, not even childhood. Everything could be used, everything could be broken. Though the box never reappears in the series, its brief moment leaves a lasting impression. It challenges readers to consider what else lies hidden among the forgotten corners of the wizarding world. How many magical objects sit in museum glass or antique stores with similar powers, their histories lost or disguised? Could one such box be passed down as a family heirloom, only to awaken when it's too late? This is the type of fear the Death Eaters specialized in, fear rooted in the mundane, the unnoticed, the benign. In a story filled with cursed rings, enchanted diaries, and haunted mirrors, the music box stands apart. It doesn't serve a grand narrative arc. It isn't a Horcrux or a hallowed object. It is a footnote in a larger tale, but an unforgettable one. That is its genius and its threat. For it shows that not all power needs to shout to be heard. Some powers whisper, and the most dangerous ones do so with a melody. Artifacts like the music box remind us of the wizarding world's complexity. Magic is not inherently good or evil, it is shaped by those who wield it. The box could have been used in healing, perhaps to calm patients in magical hospitals or soothe trauma victims. But in the hands of the Death Eaters, it became a tool of submission. That transformation reflects the darkest truth of all, that even beauty can be used for harm. In the war against Voldemort, nothing, no spell, no object, no memory, was safe from corruption. The music box is not just a fascinating piece of magical history, it is a moral lesson. It teaches caution in a world where appearances lie. It warns that enchantment can be a mask, and it stands as proof that in the right or wrong hands even the gentlest sound can become a weapon of war. Number 23. The Weasley Family Clock. In the cosy living room of the Burrow, perched on a crooked wall beside mismatched photographs and floating teacups, hangs an object that has never received the spotlight it truly deserves. It is neither a wand nor a book of spells, and yet it carries within its brass frame a kind of magic more intimate than most enchantments taught at Hogwarts. The Weasley family clock, passed down through generations, is a silent sentinel of love, fear, and unspoken prayers. Unlike the ticking timepieces of the Muggle world, this clock does not mark the passage of minutes or hours. Instead, it holds the heartbeat of a family, mapping their whereabouts, their safety, and their fates on a dial that knows only 12 names and a dozen possibilities. Each hand on the clock represents a Weasley, from Arthur and Molly down to their youngest, Ginny. It is said that even Fred and George, who once tried to charm their own magical gadgets, would never dare tamper with the clock. It was sacrosanct not merely because of its age or magical complexity, but because it served as the emotional compass of a household constantly teetering on the edge of chaos. Molly Weasley, in particular, kept a near-obsessive watch on it, especially as the shadows of the Second Wizarding War stretched long over Britain. The position of each hand told a story, sometimes dull, sometimes terrifying. At work, travelling, in danger, or the most dreaded of all, mortal peril. The term mortal peril sounds melodramatic until it becomes a reality. During the height of Lord Voldemort's return, every Weasley hand seemed glued to that ominous position. Molly once confessed to Sirius Black in Grimmauld Place that she could barely sleep at night watching all the clock hands point there. This wasn't a mere magical instrument, it was her constant reminder that the war had come home. Ron, embroiled in the hunt for Horcruxes with Harry and Hermione, stayed locked in mortal peril for months. Fred and George, once the epitome of mischief and rebellion, had left school to run their joke shop, ironically, making them targets for Death Eaters due to their open support of Dumbledore and the Order of the Phoenix. Even Bill, the eldest, newly married to Fleur, had his hand swinging between at work and mortal peril as Gringotts came under attack. Perhaps no moment captures the quiet devastation of the clock better than when Fred's hand, after the Battle of Hogwarts, stopped moving entirely. In the books, J.K. Rowling never explicitly describes this event, but readers can imagine it with an ache in their chests. The hand that had once flicked about with impish impatience now hung still, pointing to lost. The clock does not strike or ring, it simply changes as silently as the falling of tears. For Molly, who had faced off against Bellatrix Lestrange in a of maternal fury, the stillness of that hand would have been the true end of the war. The craftsmanship of the clock itself defies simple explanation. It is unlikely that Arthur Weasley built it from scratch, as its enchantments are far older and deeper than anything even a ministry wizard could easily replicate. Some fans speculate that the clock's magic is rooted in ancient blood magic, the same kind that protected Harry at Privet Drive. Its hands move not because of simple location tracking spells, but because they are bound by the ties of blood, emotion, and shared history. In this way, the clock is less of a mechanical device and more of a magical echo of the family's collective soul. When one Weasley suffers, the others feel it, and the clock records it with quiet precision. The most telling aspect of the clock is its refusal to include outsiders. Even Hermione, who was considered by many to be an honorary Weasley long before she married Ron, did not have a hand of her own. The clock respects only blood or legal family ties, further underscoring its nature as a relic of familial magic. That exclusivity is not an act of rejection but a protective boundary. Its magic is deeply personal, perhaps even ancient. Some believe that such items once existed more commonly in wizarding homes, but over time they vanished, lost in wars, or deemed too private to replicate. There is a quiet cruelty in the clock's honesty. Most magical objects lie or at least shield their users from full truth. The marauder's map, for example, could be misused or misinterpreted. The pensieve allows for the editing of memory. Even the mirror of erised shows not reality, but desire. But the Weasley clock offers no illusions. If your hand moves to lost, it means just that. If it sits on mortal peril, there is nothing you can do to protect the person, only hope they survive. It is a tool of raw, unfiltered truth. For Molly, it became both a comfort and a torment. "I couldn't bear to see all their hands pointing to danger," she said, the strain audible in her voice. "It's like a knife every time." In the chaos of the Second Wizarding War, while the Ministry collapsed and the world outside grew dark, the burrow became a sanctuary. Its wards, constantly reinforced by Arthur and Bill, held firm, but inside the clock remained unrelenting. It tracked every risk, every separation, every reunion. When Ginny returned from Hogwarts for the holidays, Molly would watch as her hand slid back to home, and only then would she exhale. When Percy finally reconciled with the family during the battle, his hand too returned from the cold realm of away to the warmth of home. The clock's forgiveness mirrored Molly's own. The love embedded in this clock makes it an artifact more valuable than a Horcrux, which requires murder, or the Elder Wand, which demands betrayal. The Weasley clock asks only for connection. It functions because its owners care so deeply for one another that the very magic of their bond fuels its mechanisms. It does not require wand work to activate or potions to maintain. It thrives on the quiet magic of family, something even Voldemort, with all his hunger for power, never understood. Even after the war, the clock remained. It did not become obsolete. If anything, it grew in significance. When the next generation of Weasleys, Rose, Hugo, James, Albus, Lily, were born, new hands were added. Each time a child came into the world, the clock acknowledged them, not because it was programmed to, but because it knew. That suggests a living enchantment, one that evolves with the family. It may be the closest thing in the magical world to a sentient heirloom, not with thoughts or emotions, but with awareness rooted in love. It's easy to overlook the clock in the grandeur of the wizarding world. Fans are drawn to the drama of the Triwizard Tournament, the spectacle of Quidditch, or the dark mystique of the Deathly Hallows. But the clock, humble, fixed to a kitchen wall, is a quiet testament to what magic is truly for. Not domination, not glory, but connection. In the end, it is this kind of magic that survives wars, defies darkness, and outlives even death. This is why, when Harry first entered the burrow, he found it more magical than Hogwarts itself, not because of its crooked walls or self-knitting needles, but because of the way the house felt alive. The clock was part of that spirit. When Harry became part of the Weasley family, through love, marriage, and war, he too understood what it meant to watch the hands of those you love and know that their lives mattered more than any spell or prophecy. K. Rowling may never have given the clock a grand backstory, but in doing so she allowed readers to imagine its legacy. Some say it belonged to Molly's grandmother, crafted during the First Wizarding War. Others believe it was made in the days when magical families feared the rise of Grindelwald. Its origins are unknown, but its message is eternal. Love is not passive. It watches, it waits, it worries, and it never forgets. The Weasley clock is more than an object. It's a relic of maternal devotion, of anxious nights and relieved mornings, of tears shed in silence and joy felt in reunion. It is a magical artifact not because it dazzles, but because it endures. Its magic is not loud, but it is deep. And in a world where darkness seeks to divide, the clock reminds us that there are enchantments stronger than any curse, those born of loyalty, family, and an unbreakable will to protect. Number 24. Hagrid's umbrella. In the pouring rain outside the hut on the rock, a pink umbrella taps against the stone step. It is an object most would overlook, absurd in size and even more so in colour, comically out of place in the hand of a man whose size defies all ordinary proportions. But the pink umbrella is more than shelter from the rain. It is more than the curious accessory of Rubeus Hagrid. It is a secret, a disguise, a shattered memory held together with threadbare hope, and a defiance so quiet it almost passes unnoticed. Inside that umbrella lies the broken wand of a boy who once dreamed of becoming a great wizard, a boy who never truly left Hogwarts. In his third year at the school, young Hagrid's world came crashing down. Tom Riddle, clever and manipulative, unleashed the terror of the basilisk within the Chamber of Secrets, and then, with a calculated flick of blame, pointed his finger at Hagrid and his beloved acromantula, Aragog. Hagrid was expelled, his wand snapped in half, his future in the magical world collapsed in a heartbeat. He was stripped not only of his education, but of his right to practice magic at all. Yet the pieces of his wand were not discarded as ordered. Hagrid, loyal to his core, kept them. He tucked them away, shielding them from the eyes of the ministry, and in time he hid them inside something as innocuous as a pink umbrella. The umbrella itself appears in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, described as a pink umbrella that Hagrid uses to perform acts of magic. This simple image quickly becomes symbolic. When Hagrid touches it to the bricks behind the leaky cauldron, the gateway to Diagon Alley opens with mechanical precision. Harry is stunned, unaware that this moment is more than just magic. It is rebellion. Hagrid is not supposed to have a wand. His use of it is technically illegal. But Hagrid is not a criminal. He is a guardian of a world that rejected him, still holding to its customs, still guiding newcomers like Harry into its heart. Throughout the series, the pink umbrella is used with purpose. In the hut on the rock, it lights a fire in the grate, transforms a sausage into breakfast, and later, much to Vernon Dursley's horror, gives Dudley Dursley a curly pig's tail. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell anyone at Hogwarts," Hagrid mutters after the act. But the damage is done, or perhaps more accurately, the magic is done. A boy was defended, a bully was punished, and a man who once stood accused of monstrous deeds reminded the world that he, too, holds power. What makes Hagrid's use of the umbrella remarkable is not just the acts themselves, but the spirit behind them. He is not trained, he is not licensed, yet he dares to do what is right. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, he uses it again to care for the magical creatures of the Forbidden Forest, risking his life to protect those he loves, both beast and boy. He does not seek glory, he asks only to belong. And through his humble pink umbrella he claims a place in a world that tried to cast him out. Albus Dumbledore, ever the silent orchestrator of second chances, plays a vital role in this quiet defiance. Though Hagrid's wand was officially destroyed, Dumbledore permitted him to stay on at Hogwarts as keeper of keys and grounds. More than that, it is heavily implied that Dumbledore either allowed or actively helped conceal the wand's remains within the umbrella. It is a subtle yet powerful act of resistance. In a society where wands are regulated and tracked, the fact that a broken wand can still cast spells speaks volumes. It means that the spirit of magic cannot be so easily broken. There is tenderness in the way Hagrid holds his umbrella. He is not careless with it. He does not flaunt it. Rather, he keeps it close, as if it were a living part of his history. Every spell it casts is an echo of the boy he once was, and a reminder that his connection to magic, though marred by injustice, was never truly severed. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Hagrid uses it again to aid Harry with the blast-ended Scroots, managing them with a mix of affection and exasperation. No matter how outlandish the situation, the pink umbrella is present, a quiet witness to every challenge and every triumph. The symbolism of the umbrella deepens when one considers what it represents in contrast to the traditional wand. A wand in wizarding culture is not merely a tool, it is an extension of the self. It is chosen, it bonds, it remembers. For Hagrid, whose wand was never allowed to fulfill its destiny, the pink umbrella becomes a surrogate. It is not beautiful, it is not elegant, but it works, and in working, it affirms that Hagrid still belongs to the world of magic, no matter what the laws dictate. The Ministry of Magic never formally investigates the matter. Perhaps they suspect and choose to look the other way as long as Hagrid remains within the boundaries of Hogwarts. Or perhaps they dismiss him as harmless, a gentle giant with no real threat. But this dismissal is a mistake. Hagrid's strength lies not just in his physical might, but in his unwavering heart. The umbrella is an emblem of that heart. It channels not only magic, but loyalty, grief, and love. There is a scene in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban when Hagrid receives word that Buckbeak is to be executed. He clutches the pink umbrella as he weeps. The object is never named in the scene, but it is implied in the moment. He holds on to the one thing that connects him to a sense of control, a sense of identity. The pink umbrella, absurd as it may seem to others, is his anchor. One must also not ignore the role that the umbrella plays in the perception of Hagrid. To children and outsiders, it is humorous, a pink umbrella for a man who stands nearly 12 feet tall, but to those who understand, it is a mask. Just as Harry's invisibility cloak conceals the boy within, the pink umbrella conceals a wand, and within it, a history. Hagrid is more than a comic figure. He is a who survived shame, injustice and fear, and who still stands proud in the only way he knows how. The legacy of Hagrid's umbrella is not measured in the spells it casts, but in the message it sends. It is a reminder that the magical world, for all its rules and hierarchies, is still a place where love and loyalty can survive in unexpected forms. The pink umbrella is not about power, it is about resilience. It is about holding on to who you are when the world tells you to forget. It is about magic that refuses to die. Years later, when Hagrid carries Harry's limp body back from the Forbidden Forest, the pink umbrella is not in sight, but its absence is meaningful. In that moment, Hagrid is not hiding. He is not casting spells. He is simply carrying the boy who brought him back to life in so many ways. The umbrella might not be in his hand, but its spirit, his spirit, remains unbroken. No one else in the series wields magic in quite the same way. No one else hides it inside an umbrella. No one else is expelled and still finds a way to belong. The pink umbrella is not an accident. It is not an afterthought. It is a symbol, rich in texture, absurd in form, and heroic in function. It may never be hung in a museum or etched into a memorial, but it lives in the memory of every reader who understood what it meant for a man like Hagrid to carry it. And perhaps that is the ultimate message of the pink umbrella, that magic, when born from the heart, cannot be broken, even when the wand is. Number 25, The Monster Book of Monsters. The book looked nothing like a book. It looked like a beast, covered in thick, bristly fur and bound with magical leather that pulsed slightly as though alive. The Monster Book of Monsters was more a creature than a volume of knowledge. Its jagged, yellowing teeth clacked when disturbed. It trembled in anticipation of violence. Harry Potter's first encounter with it left him more startled than informed. On the very first day of his third year at Hogwarts, he reached for what he thought would be just another textbook, and the thing lunged at him like a ravenous wolf. "Hagrid, what is this?" was not a question spoken, but rather screamed internally as he wrestled the tome to the ground. It was Hagrid's first year teaching the care of magical creatures, and he, ever the lover of misunderstood beasts, had thought this choice of textbook was both clever and endearing. To Harry, Ron, and Hermione, it was an act of war. The book did not merely sit quietly on a shelf. It had to be tied with a belt. It thumped angrily in their school bags. It chased unsuspecting first years down corridors. The irony was obvious. The book designed to teach about magical creatures was a magical creature in itself. A clever metaphor, perhaps, but also a hazard. The Monster Book of Monsters was no ordinary textbook. It embodied the danger and unpredictability that defined Hagrid's worldview, that even the wildest things deserved love and understanding. Hagrid, who had raised dragons and cradled baby hippogriffs, saw beauty in chaos. He had not only chosen this book, he defended it. "You've got to stroke it," he explained later, as if calming a wild dog. And indeed, stroking the spine of the book gently caused it to purr slightly and open docile and tame, revealing illustrations of grindylows, kappas, and blast-ended scroots. To students raised in a world of rationality, this was absurd. Hermione, despite her encyclopedic brain and insatiable thirst for knowledge, had difficulty reconciling with the fact that a book might require affection rather than logic. For all her wisdom, even she hadn't figured out how to open it safely before Hagrid's explanation. It was Ron who had declared it mental when his copy shredded his bedspread. But there was a deeper symbolism in that furry menace. The magical world did not yield to force or structure. It responded to care, intuition, and the unexpected language of magic, trust, vulnerability, and even love. The book itself seemed enchanted with a singular purpose: self-preservation. It avoided being read by fighting its reader. It snapped and snarled, eyes glinting red from between its covers. There were reports even of one student's book having devoured their socks. In this behavior was a subtle echo of the creatures it described. Dangerous but not evil, misunderstood rather than malicious. Just as hippogriffs demanded respect and bowed heads, so too did the book demand an approach that went beyond brute force. Harry's experience with the book mirrored his growth as a young wizard. In his first year, he faced simple incantations and potions. By third year, he was being asked to treat a textbook as if it had a soul. It was a test of empathy as much as intellect. He learned to listen, to observe, to try something unconventional. In stroking the spine of the book, he performed a small act of magical sensitivity, one that would echo later in his dealings with Buckbeak, Dobby, and even Creature. The world of magic, it seemed, was not about domination, but relationship. When Hagrid introduced the hippogriff lesson, the foundation had already been laid. The students who had tamed their books, or failed to, now stood before massive, eagle-eyed beasts who could kill with a swipe of their talon. "You've got to let him make the first move," Hagrid had warned, the same unspoken wisdom hidden in his earlier advice about the book. The lesson was consistent: approach gently, show respect, and wait to be accepted. It was a philosophy buried in the fur of that bizarre textbook, one many students missed. Among all the books Harry encountered in his time at Hogwarts, the grim whisperings of magic most evil, the dangerous instructions of the half-blood prince, even Hogwarts, a history quoted so fondly by Hermione, none had the visceral impact of the Monster Book of Monsters. Its physicality made it unforgettable. It could not be ignored. Even Professor Snape, who usually rolled his eyes at Hagrid's eccentricities, had muttered something unkind about weapons disguised as syllabi. Yet even he, for all his cruelty, never banned the book. The Ministry of Magic had mixed opinions about it. There were rumours that the Monster Book of Monsters had once been confiscated from a magical creature sanctuary where it had eaten a broomstick. Still, it was approved for educational use, likely due to Hagrid's passionate defence. And perhaps just perhaps because it worked. Despite their grumbling, the students remembered the book. They feared it, yes, but also learned from it. By the time their Hourwells approached, they knew their Grindylows from their red caps, and they remembered exactly how to handle something that wanted to bite. There was, hidden in that madness, a lesson about magical knowledge itself. Books in the wizarding world were not passive vessels of information. They bit back, they hid secrets, they judged the reader. The Monster Book of Monsters was only the most literal example. Tom Riddle's diary, that seemingly innocuous artifact in Harry's second year, was also a book with a soul, only it was deceptive rather than violent. Where the monster book barked and growled openly, Riddle's diary whispered sweet lies. Both books demanded interaction, but in opposite ways. One required taming, the other seduced its reader. In both cases, to survive, Harry had to develop a sixth sense, the ability to read the soul behind the pages. The Monster Book of Monsters was absurd but honest. Its violence was not treachery, but instinct. It was not evil, and that made it strangely trustworthy. Harry learned to respect that difference, and that respect shaped his approach to other magical beings who straddled the line between danger and innocence. It's notable that years later the book never appears again. It does not resurface in the Room of Requirement. It is not part of the Horcrux hunt, but its influence lingers. It is one of those formative magical artifacts that teaches without preaching, a living metaphor in leather and fang. It taught Harry that not all danger is evil, and not all knowledge is clean. Sometimes to learn, you must get bitten first. The book was also a test of the reader's patience, not unlike magic itself. One did not command it, but approached it. It trained students to observe before acting, to think before touching, a subtle preparation for handling real magical creatures, and more deeply, a reminder that the magical world didn't owe explanations to anyone. Like the centaurs of the Forbidden Forest or the merpeople of the Black Lake, it operated on its own logic. To learn from it, one had to first accept its terms. The Monster Book of Monsters, for all its absurdity, marked a turning point in Harry's education. It represented the shift from passive learning to active engagement, from the relative simplicity of first-year charms to the complexity of magical ethics. It was a bridge between theory and reality. It wasn't meant to be just read, it was meant to be survived. And in surviving it, students gained more than just knowledge, they gained awareness. In many ways, the book was Hagrid's heart on display. Wild, misunderstood, and covered in metaphorical fur, it offered something raw and true. Hagrid didn't want his students to just memorize facts about creatures. He wanted them to understand why creatures mattered, why they were worth saving, why fear should never come before curiosity. And in assigning the Monster Book of Monsters, he gave them a piece of that philosophy, whether they liked it or not. So when Harry stroked the spine of the book, and it finally opened, not with a snarl but with a sigh, it was more than a trick. It was a victory. Not of dominance, but of understanding. And in that quiet, furry hush, somewhere between the description of a pogrobin and the anatomy of a nundu, a 13-year-old wizard took his first step toward empathy, one page at a time. Number 26, The Magical Tent. It was not the first time magic made the ordinary extraordinary, but there was something uniquely whimsical about the old frayed tent that Arthur Weasley borrowed for the Quidditch World Cup. To the casual Muggle observer, it looked barely serviceable, faded canvas flapping in the wind, patches along the seams, a crooked pole that leaned slightly to the left. Yet when Harry Potter stepped inside, he found not a cramped camping setup, but a fully furnished, multi-roomed home, complete with a kitchen, bunk beds, and even a fireplace. This was not simply magical, it was a living example of how wizards manipulated physical space to defy logic, comfort, and necessity all at once. And this very artifact, so humble in appearance, would later become a lifeline for Harry, Ron, and Hermione as they embarked on the darkest journey of their lives. This particular tent, enhanced with undetectable extension charms, was first encountered in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire when the trio attended the Quidditch World Cup with the Weasley family. Its first impression was unforgettable. Harry marvelled at how stepping through the canvas flap brought him into a place that looked more like a flat than a tent, complete with a bathroom and a kitchen. In that moment, the boundaries of what counted as a portable home dissolved. What this object demonstrated was not just a whimsical use of charm work, but a deeper insight into how wizardkind reimagined even the simplest aspects of life, such as shelter, into tools of adaptability and resourcefulness. Years later, that same tent returned, not as a backdrop to celebration, but as a refuge in times of war. When the trio fled the safety of the burrow in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Hermione revealed that she had taken the enchanted tent from the Order of the Phoenix's stores. In a world where nowhere was safe, this worn, dusty structure became their sanctuary. It shielded them from the cold, from Death Eaters, and from the suffocating weight of uncertainty. She had packed the tent into her beaded bag, the book tells us, a detail that added another layer of marvel, magic within magic, a tent expanded internally, now shrunken to fit into a handbag no larger than a coin purse. The idea of the tent became symbolic of the wizarding world's blend of convenience and deception. From the outside, it was nothing, an eyesore barely held together by threads. But inside, it gave warmth, protection, and the illusion of stability. It was both a physical structure and a metaphor for their journey, disguised, mobile, always teetering between collapse and comfort. In many ways, it mirrored Harry himself, underestimated on the surface, but hiding strength, complexity, and depth that only those closest to him could understand. The interior of the tent was described in the books with meticulous, almost nostalgic detail. There were beds with woolen blankets, a copper kettle bubbling gently over a fire, and a sense of home that lingered even in the most remote of forests. When Harry lay awake listening to the wind howl outside, it was this tent that made their desperate quest bearable. It allowed them to cook, to sleep, to regroup, and to argue. It became their war room, their diary chamber, their confessional. The tent was not just a magical object. It became a character in its own right, silent but ever-present, bearing witness to the unfolding story. This magical artifact also served as a powerful counterpoint to the more sinister magical objects in the story. While Horcruxes corrupted and disfigured, the tent preserved and protected. Where dark magic shrunk the soul, this simple piece of enchanted fabric expanded possibility. Unlike the Sword of Gryffindor or the Deathly Hallows, the tent was never mythologized or given a name. It had no legend, no prophecy. It simply existed, as magic sometimes does, to make life livable under impossible conditions. But the tent also revealed the limitations of magic. Though its insides were vast, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense and suffocating as the journey dragged on. The comfort it offered began to feel like a prison. It felt as though the walls were closing in, Harry reflects during a particularly grim moment. This tent, which once seemed miraculous, now carried the scent of damp clothes and arguments. Its space expanded, but their morale shrank. In that way, the tent became a silent mirror of their psychological state, full of potential at first, then worn down by the weight of despair. Even the way the tent was used highlighted Hermione's foresight and careful planning. While Ron often forgot essentials and Harry depended on instinct, Hermione prepared. She charmed her beaded bag, packed books, healing potions, and this tent, demonstrating how even in war, a little domestic planning could be the difference between survival and catastrophe. That she thought to bring this specific tent, remembered from their days with the Order, shows her deep understanding of both magic and human needs. It's fascinating that in a world of flying broomsticks, time-turners, and sentient portraits, this simple tent stands out so vividly, It is not an item of power but of practicality. It doesn't duel, fly, or glow with ancient runes, yet its value in the narrative cannot be overstated. Without it, the trio would have been forced to sleep in the open, vulnerable to patrols and dementors. Its magic was subtle, but indispensable, precisely the kind of magic that defines the wizarding world at its best. The aesthetic contrast between the tent's interior and exterior also speaks volumes about the nature of wizarding society. Wizards often cared little for outward appearances, valuing function over form, but here that disregard became a tactic. Invisibility was survival. The tent's ragged appearance allowed it to blend into forests and fields, drawing no attention. It was invisible in plain sight. In that way, the tent was a lesson in humility, a reminder that not all magic announces itself with fireworks. This magical artifact also emphasized how the wizarding world redefined portability. In the Muggle world, a backpack is a backpack. In the magical world, it might be a house, a library, or a hospital. Wizards in bending space also bent expectations. The tent could be erected in seconds and vanish in moments. For Harry and his friends, this mobility was crucial. They never stayed in one place for long. The tent allowed them to move like shadows, never leaving a trace. In a war where being found could mean death, this flexibility was not just a luxury, it was survival. There was also an emotional resonance to the tent. It carried memories of Arthur Weasley's proud smile, of warm breakfasts before the chaos of the Quidditch World Cup, of simpler times. Later, it witnessed arguments, heartbreaks, and Ron's temporary departure. And still it stood, the same fabric that once hosted laughter now heard silent sobs. That duality is what makes magical artifacts in Harry Potter so enduring. They are not just tools, they are vessels of history, memory, and emotion. It is tempting to dismiss the tent as a footnote in the story, a mere object of convenience, but that would overlook its narrative role. The tent connected major moments in the timeline, from the joyful energy of the Quidditch World Cup to the grim desolation of the Horcrux hunt. It served as the physical space where key decisions were made, where truths were confessed, and where the line between hope and despair was drawn again and again. Without the tent, their journey would have been impossible, or at the very least unbearably cold. Magic in the world of Harry Potter is not always about spectacle. Often, it's about making the unbearable slightly more bearable. The tent did not defeat Voldemort. It did not shatter Horcruxes or reveal prophecies. But it did provide a roof over the heads of 3 teenagers fighting to save the world. It gave them meals, sleep, and a shred of privacy. In a war of dark wizards and cursed relics, the most powerful spell might have been the one that turned 2 square meters of fabric into a home. Number 27, Hermione's beaded bag. Hermione Granger never needed a flashy wand movement or a theatrical incantation to prove she was one of the greatest witches of her time. Her magic wasn't loud, it was meticulous, thoughtful, and brilliant. The true evidence of her magical genius did not lie in duels or dramatic spells, but in something far subtler, a small, beaded handbag. No one would mistake this inconspicuous accessory for an ancient wand or a cursed amulet. Yet it was one of the most important magical artifacts in the wizarding world. It didn't shimmer or hum with power, but it carried within it a miracle, space beyond space, protection born of foresight, and the wisdom of a witch who planned for war with the precision of a scholar. During the perilous months of their journey to destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes, Hermione's enchanted handbag became their lifeline. Hidden inside the velvet folds of this tiny bag was everything they needed to survive: books on defensive magic, changes of clothing, bottles of essence of dittany, a small camping stove, enchanted tents, food supplies, and even a portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black. It wasn't just storage, it was salvation. Hermione had used the undetectable extension charm on the bag, a spell so advanced that it was tightly controlled by the Ministry of Magic. "The charm on the bag is flawless," she had said, explaining how it expanded the interior while keeping the outer appearance modest and portable. This was not the type of magical artifact you'd find in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library, covered in curses and steeped in centuries of blood magic. It was a quiet miracle woven through with intelligence and love. When they fled the wedding of Bill and Fleur, it was Hermione's bag that allowed them to disappear into the night with their world still intact. She had packed it in advance, without telling anyone, not out of secrecy but out of habit. Hermione planned ahead for disaster the way others planned weekend holidays. She did not need to be told that the journey would be dangerous. She anticipated it, prepared for it, and did what no textbook could fully teach. She applied magic with soul and strategy. What made this handbag a true artifact was not merely the charm itself, but its function as a portable sanctuary. When the trio was on the run, hunted by snatchers and Death Eaters unable to apparate freely or find shelter, the bag became a sacred object. From it, she would produce the magically expanded tent, identical to the one they had used at the Quidditch World Cup years earlier. That tent became their safe house, their stronghold, their last piece of civilization. Inside its folds, they read Dumbledore's book on the Deathly Hallows, nursed their wounds, and argued in the flickering light of a conjured fire. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, J.K. Rowling wrote, Hermione's tiny, beaded handbag now held a small library, tents, clothes for all three of them, and an assortment of useful spellbooks. This wasn't just impressive magic, it was meaningful. Each item in that bag was chosen with care, books that might help them undo curses or translate ancient runes, potions that could heal the wounded, clothes to disguise themselves, food to sustain them, even a device for ensuring that their water was safe to drink. In that tiny bag, Hermione condensed the wisdom of a magical education, the instinct of a survivalist, and the compassion of someone who could not bear to see her friends suffer. It is easy to admire the Elder Wand or the Resurrection Stone for their raw power or dark histories. But Hermione's bag had no blood-soaked legacy. Its power was born from quiet brilliance and the deep human instinct to protect. When they were camping near Dean's Wood, freezing and hungry, it was Hermione who summoned warm sweaters and soup from her bag. When Ron left and Harry fell into despair, the only warmth in the bitter wind came from the hearths she could create, and the invisible safety of that little handbag nestled beside her as she slept. Even the presence of Phineas Nigellus Black's portrait inside the bag speaks volumes. Most wouldn't think to bring a talking painting along for a mission to destroy pieces of a Dark Lord's soul. But Hermione did, and this decision proved vital when they learned from Phineas, through his unwilling cooperation, that Severus Snape had hidden the sword of Gryffindor in the lake under the forest of Dean. That single clue may have saved Harry's life. It certainly altered the course of their journey. That wasn't luck. That was Hermione packing the bag as if it were the vault of 1,000 strategic outcomes. The charm itself, the undetectable extension charm, was a masterwork, not just for its complexity, but for the control and elegance required to keep it stable. In the wrong hands, such a spell could cause catastrophic damage to the fabric of space inside an object. Improper casting could make the item explode or collapse into itself, but Hermione's bag never faltered, never spilled, never bulged with the weight of what was inside. It sat lightly on her shoulder like a whisper while carrying a fortress. There is a scene in the book that encapsulates the artifact's significance more than any other. When the trio narrowly escapes the Ministry of Magic after infiltrating it under Polyjuice Potion, they are ambushed and nearly caught. Chaos reigns, spells fly, Harry's cover is blown, yet they disapparate just in time, landing in the forest, but Ron is splinched, gravely wounded. Hermione dives into her bag rummaging for Dittany and applies it to his injured arm. Without the bag, Ron might have bled to death. It held not just supplies, but life-saving magic. In that moment, it wasn't just a handbag. It was a battlefield medical kit, a hidden apothecary, a lifeline born from foresight and love. The magical world has always revered artifacts tied to conquest, lineage, or death, but Hermione's bag offers a different kind of power, quiet resistance. It wasn't built to kill or control. It was built to endure. Like its creator, it did not demand attention, but when it was needed, it delivered. In many ways, the bag became Hermione herself, small in stature, but infinite in substance. Portable wisdom, grace under pressure. A miracle hidden in plain sight. It is telling that the bag is not returned to the Hogwarts archives, nor displayed in the Department of Mysteries. It remains hers. Perhaps no one else could unlock its full purpose. It is too personal, too tailored to the particularities of Hermione's mind. Just as the marauder's map would not reveal itself to someone who lacked the right mischief, the bag's true significance would be lost on someone seeking only raw magic. Its genius is invisible to those who seek spectacle. Hermione's bag is also a lesson in magical ethics. She uses her knowledge to serve and protect, not to show off. At any moment, she could have been tempted to abuse the charm, hide stolen goods, create wealth, hoard power. But every object she placed in that bag had a purpose connected to their mission. No excess, no greed. It is a portrait of restraint and a study in how magic should be used as a tool of freedom, not vanity. In retrospect, there is irony in how unremarkable the bag appears. In a world filled with cursed lockets and forbidden books, the greatest magical instrument in the fight against Voldemort was no larger than a purse. It didn't glow or shudder or scream. It simply opened again and again and gave the trio exactly what they needed. That quiet dependability was its true power. Though the story is called Harry Potter, there are moments when it is clear that the beating heart of their journey, the steady hand guiding them through frost and fire, is Hermione, her spells, her decisions, her courage in the face of endless danger, and all of that in some way is captured in the little bag she carried on her shoulder. It wasn't just an accessory, it was a declaration that brilliance could be compassionate, and that magic, at its best, was preparation born of love.